Humans on the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, we need to talk about Exosister, okay? Because they've gotten a couple things of support. They got one card that's going to be coming in Dimension Force, two more cards that are going to be coming in Power of the Elements, and I think these cards are huge, huge booms. It's really funny, but I'm not gonna lie. The first time I saw this archetype when it came out in Grand Creators, I thought this archetype was poop. And you know what? I'm gonna put it on myself. I think I was pretty right. I don't think it's a great archetype until we get the new cards, and then things just like, you know, so many things open up with these new cards. And I always look at a couple different factors for it, and we'll get to those when we actually get to those cards again. I've already done like basic reviews of them, but today we're talking about just the deck as a whole and how it's actually going to be able to compete in the metagame, and where it's actually going to fall in terms of tiering and all that stuff. So yeah, let's get started by going through what the deck already started with. Of course, this is an Exceed based strategy. They all have the same, all the main deck girls have this same like clause where if you're, hold on, I want to read this word for word, right? If you, hold on, if your opponent moves a card or cards out of the graveyard, except during damage step, you can special summon an extra deck Exosister monster using this face-up card you control as material. So long story short, if your opponent does anything, they can just immediately trigger and pop you into one of your Exceeds. The problem is not every deck is going to make it super easy for you to trigger these. And so it seemed like the first wave, the deck was just a little too reliant on these just simple effects and not actually helping the deck have a good engine to even just get you into raw Exceeds without having to rely on these effects. But now the new support helps with that. So starting off for all the main deck monsters, they all have additional effects as well. Sophia's probably the best one. If you control another Exosister on the field, you just draw a card for free. Cool. Ellis, if you control an Exosister, she just jumps out of the hand. Pretty solid extender. Stella, she can actually summon another Exosister from your hand, so good to help pull stuff out of the hand. And Irene, by far the worst one. She can like kind of get you just cycle a card in hand, put an Exosister on the bottom of the deck, then draw one. Fine, sure. She's by far the worst one, but still playable because I think you do need to have all the right names. Anyway, then you get to the spells. Pax is an insane search card, like no joke. During the main phase, pay 800 to add an Exosister card from deck to hand. That's a quick effect too. Then if you added a monster by this effect, you can special summon it if the other name listed in it is on your field or in your graveyard. So all these, they all coexist with another one. So this one lists Ellis in the name. So these two work together, and I believe Irene and Sophia list each other as well. So if you have the other one, you can just straight up make this E-Telly really, really solid. Especially if you have something like Irene on the field and you're just able to summon Sophia straight out of the deck and then draw a card also. It just becomes a plus, like an E-Telly that draws you a card. Really, really strong. But also the fact that it searches everything in the deck. Really, really good. Armament, this just lets you quick effect overlay on top of an Exosister you control. I think before this was like super mandatory, but now with the new support, this becomes less of a crutch for the deck, and that's really nice. You don't really want to have to rely on a card like this because it is at its base like straight up a -1. So I like this. It's probably now like a searchable 1 of, maybe a 2 of, but you don't have to rely on it as hard, which is really nice. And then Carpe Diem, this is a cool utility card. It helps you pop back row if your Exosisters battle, and also if you Exceed, it triggers this to then declare a card name, and your opponent just like can't use the effects of that card for the rest of that turn. Can be really nice. At most, it's a 1 of. I'm sure a lot of lists will choose not to play this though. But I do think it's interesting. Then you get to the traps. The traps are also really strong. Vadi is the one that we already have, or Vadis, pay 800. It summons one Exosister from your deck. Then take another Exosister with this that mentions the other one. So you have to pick the pairs again, summon them straight from deck, and then on the end phase, shuffle them into the deck if they're still on the field. And you're also locked into Exosisters for the rest of the turn. So it does have some restrictions, but it is still pretty powerful as a follow-up play to be able to search this, some of these on the opponent's turn. This, again, right now in current build, seems like a 3 of. Like you want to rely on this card. It helps you get into your monsters more and more. But I do think in the new build, this becomes a 1 of, maybe a 2 of again. Kind of in that same situation as a Mento. So really interesting. Then you get to the Exceeds. They're all pretty good, to be honest. Mikalis is by far the best one. Searches any Mikalis spell or trap by detaching a card. And then they all have this effect, all 4 of them, the main ones. When they're summoned, for the rest of the turn, or it just kind of is they gain a quick effect the turn their Exceed summon, I should say, just to make that more simple, or they can do something. This card just targets a card your opponent controls, banishes it. Really strong, really strong. Then you have Caspatel. She can detach to search a monster, and her quick effect, neither player can use or can special summon monsters from the graveyard for the rest of the turn. That doesn't seem like the biggest thing, but depending on the deck you're playing against, that could actually be a pretty decent floodgate for your opponent. Definitely. I mean, it does just stop. If you can make this in like the draw phase, you may be able to like stop potentially your opponent's DPE from coming back, but I don't know how legitimate that is. How easily you'd be able to set that up. Then you have Sophiel. She's kind of like Dweller, I believe, right? If this card is Exceed summoned, neither player can activate card effects in the graveyard this turn. That's pretty brutal. That's straight up Dweller. So this one's really strong, and you can detach a material to just bounce a monster. Not too shabby. And then you finish with Jabreen. She can target a monster your opponent controls, negate it. She's just kind of like a walking impermanence, and she can detach a material to have all Exceed monsters you control gain 800 permanently. That includes herself, so she'll go to 22. If you have one or two other Exceeds, that's just 20. If you had 3 Exceeds on the field, that's just 2400 damage added onto your what you already have on the board, which is actually huge and almost guarantees OTK in most situations. So this card does come up. It's at least a one-of, because this card is going to guarantee OTKs when you otherwise don't have them. So that's everything we have so far, right? Pretty simple, right? You have your cool Exceeds. They're all pretty decent in their own right, of course. But the biggest flaw to me, right, was we're in 2022. You can't give us a rank 4 archetype and not have like really strong ways to get into it Exceeds. Yes, their bonus effect is nice, but that's just assuming you're playing a deck that literally has to move cards from grave to play. And if a deck does not have to, absolutely have to, then they could play around this. They'll play with a lower ceiling on their deck by not doing small things, even if it's a deck that doesn't rely on it. But your deck is like less than half as good. Like literally, it's like less than 50% of what it could be if your opponent's not giving you any triggers on your effects to tag in, and so that's the brutality of it. And so the deck needed super like a much easier way to actually get into these cards, and that's what we get into here. So the first card we have is Coming in Dimension Force, and this card doesn't necessarily solve that problem, but it does become a really powerful card. So this card actually requires 2 of your rank 4s Exosisters to make, so it is kind of brutal, but trust me, you'll see the other cards and it'll make more sense. This card will be way easier to summon. It can attack twice. Really good also, helping you OTK. I mean, imagine this with Jabreen. This is already 28. Jabreen makes it 36 and can attack twice. And Jabreen, after using effects, will be 22. So right there is already, what, 9,400 damage? That is a ton just from having those 2 Exceeds on the field. Secondly, it has a quick effect to detach a material to banish a card your opponent controls. That's also non-targeting, so it's a little bit better than Mikalisa's. And then the final effect here, which is also really good, when your opponent activates any card or effect. So you have to wait for your opponent to do something, but this is a 28-20 beater, so it's not going to. Your opponent's almost always going to have to activate something to try and get around this. Return 1 Exceed monster attached to this card that you own to the extra deck. Then you can special summon that monster from your extra deck using this face-up card you control as material. So assuming you're always making this with Mikalise, you would be able to use this card's first effect to banish something as an eruption. Then when your opponent activates something else, you can tag this card's material that has Mikalise under it into a Mikalise on the opponent's turn, and that would then make Mikalise's quick effect to banish also live. So you would have double banish off of this card, and this card can attack twice next turn. So there's, even without Jabreen or anything, 5,600 damage, and Mikalise is 25. So right there is already, I think, 56 plus 2,000 is 7,100 damage, I think, if your opponent doesn't have a monster. But we're banishing 2 cards, so there's a decent chance they wouldn't be able to keep anything on the field at that point. So really strong. This card just gives you so many good plays, honestly. This card is just a house for sure. This becomes a super important card once we get the final cards revealed, but for right now, it's like we're gonna get this and it's gonna be like, okay, how do we even make this consistently? And then we get the final stuff and it's gonna be like, oh, this card's crazy. Because we have Exosister Malfa. This is the most important card for sure. it straight up becomes like the best card in the deck. If you control no monsters or all Exceed monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, special summon an Exosister Ellis from your deck. That is specifically Ellis. Keep that in mind. She's one of the good ones anyway, so you're probably playing her at 3 regardless, but yeah. This would have been amazing if this could summon any Exosister, because then you just pull Sophia out of the deck every time and draw an extra card as well. But still, this is a 1-card rank 4 without your normal summon. That is so strong. That's 2022 rank 4 spam, if I've ever seen it. You are locked into Exosisters for the rest of the turn, which makes sense. Sure, we can't abuse generic rank 4s with this, but we can just still make all of our really good Exosister cards. And the final effect on this card is just the same as the rest. If a card is moved out of... Actually, this card says if a card is moved out of either graveyard. So even if you move something from your graveyard, it'll trigger her as well. She even becomes a little more generic than the other ones. But that main effect is the first one there. Because we have packs and stuff, right? This is essentially already a 6 of... And also Mikalis can search packs to get this. So if you can at least get to Mikalis, or if you can get to the other rank 4 that just searches a monster, search this, right? That extends you into another rank 4, and that would then get you into your new boss monster, your rank 8, this one, the Magnifica. So really, really good. This card becomes a important, like the most important engine card in your deck after this. Like seriously. So good. And then the final card here is Exosister Litania. This is a really good interruption card. Once we saw that we had 1 trap earlier, I was kind of like always hoping that we'd get another interruption trap, and we absolutely got a good one here. If all monsters you control are Exosisters, pay 800 life points, then target a card your opponent controls or in their grave, banish it. Field or grave, just banish. Really good. Then you can apply one of these effects. Immediately after this effect resolves, Exceed summon an Exosister monster you control. Cool. That works. Or the other one, if you Exceed summon previously this turn, you can banish 1 card your opponent controls. So the idea would be is if either you're already playing, you're ending on Magnifica when you set this card, or you were able to like tag in on your opponent's turn using their other effects, this card would be allowed to use a second effect to just gain an additional non-targeting banish. So it's banish, banish. We have like... You could potentially banish 4 cards in the same turn with this deck, and it wouldn't even take that many, like a crazy hand to set up. It would take a good hand, but not a crazy hand, which is so, so good. So having an actual insane interruption card like this is really, really good. I like this. It's probably a 2 of, maybe even a 3 of, depending on your situation, but I really, really like this. So there you go. Those are the new cards, and these cards immediately made this deck like so much better in my eyes, right? Like one thing I always look at is I always look at these cards and I look at a couple different factors, right? Does it help with the power of the deck? Does the deck do more, faster, and just like higher ceiling? Yes, this card absolutely pushes the ceiling of the deck. So does Litania, actually allowing you to end on an insane trap card as well if you don't want to go for follow-up in Vadi. As well as Magnifica, getting you a double banish if you can end on this. Like, and what's so insane is that you have like your rank 4s that are interruptions plus searchers. So you make Magnifica search, make the other one search, and then overlay those for this, and this is a double banish on your opponent's turn. So you already got value back by searching off the first 2 rank 4s, and then you end on this guy who's a powerful banish, or this girl who's going to be a double banish essentially. Really, really good. The fact that like those like just rotate into each other like that and make up value, because before it would have been use 1 or 2 cards from hand to make the first Exceed, 1 or 2 cards from hand to make the second Exceed, make whatever it was, you know what I mean, Utopic Draco, but instead in this case make Magnifica, and you use 3 or 4 cards out of your hand. But now because we're searching 2 on the way, it makes it so much nicer, right? And you guarantee follow-up so much easier. So you help with power. You also help with consistency in the fact that this is just another 3 of like now the best starter in your deck. And we already play packs. Packs is just a part of the deck. So this is a 6 of instead of just a 3 of. So this card coming here is just so much better. And then you look at, I guess, utility. And I guess this card helps with utility. Just the fact that the deck has like 4 good Exceed monsters it can use for rank 4s. And this card can just kind of help you turbo into any of them. I guess in that essence, you could say it helps with you know, utility. And of course, speed. Speed is like one of the biggest things. You're going to be able to make these good Exceed plays all turn 1. You're going to be able to do like legit Exceed combos turn 1. And it's all because of this card. Very, very, very huge. And for Vadi, as far as all that stuff goes, of course, power, right? Being able to actually end on this on top of whatever your other interruptions are. And Consistency wise, it doesn't necessarily help, but I guess no, I mean, like, to be honest, this isn't really a consistency card. It's more of an end board card, but it's still not a bad card to draw because you're going to play so many Exosister names. Just seeing any of them just makes this card that you don't have to search it, and then you can search Vadi. So in that instance, it does help. And then utility-wise, it helps because it's a new utility option for some of your searches, and that's really good to be able to end on more interruptions instead of focusing more on follow-up. That definitely happens all the time. So really, really good. Where do I think this deck ends up? I think it probably ends up somewhere in like the solid rogue option, legit. I don't know if it'll be legit tier 2, but at least a solid rogue deck that you need to be wary about because this deck is no joke. This deck off of 2, in an optimal hand, 2 cards in hand could easily end up with, 3 banishes and a follow-up, right? And then they have 3 other cards in hand to set, which is insane. So you have to be wary of this deck. This deck is going to be immensely scary. It's obviously not incredibly strong going second. The new card helps going second because it does kind of turbo them into Exceed, so you can play through interruptions and stuff, but a little bit better. But still, you're not breaking insane boards by any means. But I still really like the way the deck is looking now. It looks so much more interesting. Obviously, Zeus is still an option, stuff like that. There's other rank 4s that if you don't use the new girl, you can still abuse and take advantage of, and that's just something you're going to have to keep an eye out for. But there you go. I think that deck's really solid. I just want to do a discussion about this because I had done reviews on like the newer cards when they came out, but I hadn't done an overall scope review of where the archetype looks. I was not interested in this archetype at all, and then we saw the 2 new cards, and I actually really want to build this deck when it comes out now because it just seems so one note right now, and now it's going to be like so much better, so much more interesting, so much more flexible, so much more fun to play than it is right now. And I'm glad Konami really gave them the support they deserve. But yeah, that's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching as always. Sorry if I rambled a little too much in this one, but I'm going to get the hell out of here. I love you. Peace.